What are the key elements that make a story enjoyable and engaging? Adventure, a charming heroine, a handsome hero, betrayal and conspiracy. These are dramatic elements that make reality a million times more entertaining than fiction. All of this is present in today's episode, where we will discuss one of the most important and famous rulers of Egypt in its history, Queen Cleopatra. The great English playwright William Shakespeare drew inspiration from the tragic life of Cleopatra VII and crafted an immortal play bearing her name. This is one of the reasons that has made her one of the most renowned rulers of Egypt worldwide. Another reason is that she served as a cultural bridge between Europe and Egypt, as she was the last monarch of the Macedonian dynasty, which had Greek origins. Cleopatra was born in January 69 BC, and her father, Ptolemy XII, named her Cleopatra, a name meaning glory of the father. She ascended to the throne of Egypt in 51 BC, joining the dynasty that ruled Egypt for over 250 years. This dynasty began with Ptolemy I, who served as a general in Alexander the Great's army in the 4th century BC, and concluded with Cleopatra VII herself. Cleopatra grew up in a palace in Alexandria among 5 siblings, and to this day, her mother's identity remains uncertain. It was known in the Ptolemaic dynasty that siblings often married each other to preserve the purity of the ruling lineage. This practice was common in ancient royal families in Egypt. Cleopatra and her siblings were raised in a way that ensured the continuity of the dynasty. This upbringing allowed women to exercise power independently or to be co-rulers alongside men, as heirs did not necessarily have to be male. This enabled Cleopatra to receive an education, preparing her for governance and the management of her responsibilities, comparable to any man in the ruling family. This approach reflected what the Ptolemies learned from the ancient Egyptian law of the time, which imposed absolute equality between men and women. Cleopatra was a beautiful and intelligent woman with remarkable political acumen, capable of enchanting many key figures of her era with her charisma. Moreover, she was a talented singer, possessed a lovely voice, and spoke 9 languages, including Mediterranean languages like Greek and Latin, as well as ancient Egyptian. Notably, this makes her the first among the Ptolemaic rulers to speak the Egyptian language. Cleopatra likened herself to the Egyptian goddess Isis, claiming to embody her life on earth to the point that she dubbed herself New Isis. This was a clever piece of propaganda at the time, as it signified her respect as a foreign queen for the beliefs and religion of the Egyptians. Cleopatra ascended to power after her father's death when she was just 18 years old. However, she did not rule Egypt alone. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, was supposed to share the throne with her, in accordance with Ptolemaic custom. He was younger than her by 8 years, and due to his youth, there were guardians overseeing his rule. These guardians incited him to expel his sister from Alexandria, so that he could rule alone. Consequently, Cleopatra had to flee to Syria. There, she managed to raise an army of mercenaries and returned to Egypt in 48 BC to reclaim the throne by force. She confronted her brother on the eastern border of Egypt at Pelusium, which is modern-day Port Said. At the same time, there was a schism and rebellion in Rome, and the leader of this rebellion, Pompey, fled from Rome to Egypt after being defeated in a battle known as the Battle of Pharsalus. When Pompey arrived in Egypt, he was killed by the advisors of King Ptolemy XIII, and his head was presented to the victorious leader, Julius Caesar, who reached Alexandria on October 2, 48 BCE. Pompey was not an enemy of Egypt, but a refugee. However, Ptolemy XIII wanted to demonstrate his loyalty to Caesar, hoping to gain his support in his fight against his sister. At that time, Cleopatra managed to escape to Caesar's palace, wrapped in a luxurious carpet, and made her way to his bedroom. She was 21 years old and strikingly beautiful, while Caesar was 52. What happened between them that night is not precisely known, but many historians have speculated about this relationship, which was revealed when her brother saw them the next morning. Ptolemy XIII claimed that Cleopatra had seduced Caesar. Alexandria underwent a siege that lasted throughout a complete winter until reinforcements from Rome arrived in March 47 BCE. When the reinforcements came, Ptolemy XIII fled and drowned in the Nile while trying to escape, allowing Cleopatra to regain her throne with Caesar's support. Cleopatra began to share rule with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, who was 11 years old at the time, and in the Ptolemaic tradition, she married him, giving birth to her son in 46 BCE, whom she named Ptolemy Caesar, popularly known as Caesarion. The Egyptians believed the child was Julius Caesar's son, but Caesar could not acknowledge him due to legal issues in Rome. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar was not merely a romantic passion. It was a well-calculated political alliance, as both were brilliant and skilled politicians with shared interests and ambitions. They understood the importance of keeping Egypt independent, especially for Caesarion's future, and thus Cleopatra was able to consolidate her power in Egypt during Caesar's absence, who had returned to Rome. In the fall of 46 BCE, Caesar invited Cleopatra to Rome, where she lived with her brother, husband, and son in stability and material prosperity, receiving valuable titles and gifts. However, matters changed after Caesar's assassination on March 15, 44 BCE. Upon her return to Egypt, she found she had lost her husband, Ptolemy XIV, who died under unknown circumstances, which granted Caesarion, then 3 years old, the title of Ptolemy XV. During Cleopatra's rule, Egypt experienced a period of safety and stability until it faced floods and food shortages. This occurred at a time when relations were deteriorating among Caesar's allies and those who assassinated him, led by Cassius and Brutus. Octavian and Mark Antony emerged victorious after they requested support and supplies from Cleopatra. Cleopatra was satisfied to send them 4 Roman legions that belonged to Caesar and were stationed in Egypt. After Mark Antony's victory in Rome, he summoned Cleopatra to the city of Cilicia in Tarsus to account for her indecisiveness and lack of full support for the followers of Julius Caesar. Cleopatra indeed traveled on a luxurious golden pharaonic ship, dressed as the goddess Isis. Antony was captivated upon seeing her and fell in love, and she was also impressed by him. Not only because of his appearance, which was said by historians to be very handsome, but also due to his intelligence. Mark Antony's admiration for Cleopatra led him to travel after her to Egypt, leaving behind his family, which included his wife and 3 children. Mark Antony stayed in Alexandria for about a year, and he and Cleopatra created a salon for drinking, conversation, and literature, which they called the Society of Cups. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, Cleopatra Selene and Alexander Helios. Antony then returned to Rome, where his wife Fulvia, whom he had left, passed away, and he married Octavia, the half-sister of his ally Octavian. In 37 BCE, Antony sought Cleopatra's support once again to finance his military campaign against the Parthian kingdom. The love rekindled between Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and Cleopatra became pregnant again, giving birth to a son named Ptolemy Philadelphus. After a disastrous defeat in his battle against the Parthian kingdom, Antony returned to Egypt and declared that Caesarion, the son of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, was the legitimate heir to the throne, thus excluding Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. This caused the relationship between Mark Antony and Octavian to deteriorate, leading to war between them, and thus Octavian declared war on Cleopatra as well, considering her an ally of Antony. In 32 BCE, Antony divorced his wife Octavia and officially married Cleopatra. During their honeymoon on a Mediterranean tour, Octavian was preparing for war. The naval battle of Actium took place in western Greece in 31 BCE, and Antony was forced to flee. Cleopatra returned to Alexandria and began gathering her forces. After a few weeks, the two were besieged. Antony lost many ships in attempts to break this siege. Cleopatra did everything she could to avoid disaster, to the extent that she even offered Octavian to renounce the throne for her children, but Octavian ignored this offer. While Mark Antony was preparing for his final battle against the new Roman general, whose forces had reached the outskirts of Alexandria in 30 BCE, Cleopatra hid in a tomb she used as a treasure vault. Antony heard false news of Cleopatra's suicide, which deeply saddened him. He threw himself on his sword and was taken to Cleopatra's tomb to die beside her. Accounts say that Cleopatra, upon hearing the news of Antony's loss at the Battle of Actium and his suicide, also decided to end her life. She was bitten by a snake brought to her by one of her servants. Some historical studies suggest that Octavian was responsible for the deaths of Cleopatra and her son as part of his plan to seize the entire empire, including Egypt. Regardless of how Cleopatra died, she politically died with Mark Antony's defeat at Actium. This moment marked the end of her quest for the independence of her rule over Egypt, for which she had done everything, yet the throne never settled for her. What remains in history is a dramatic and captivating narrative in all its details, bearing the name Cleopatra VII.